Since the start of this year, BYD has dethroned Tesla as the top-selling battery electric vehicle brand in the UK. Also this year, 1 out of every 3 pure EVs sold in Italy carries a Chinese brand badge. You might think this makes sense before the tariff hikes. But here's the twist. This exact same year, the EU just imposed countervailing duties of up to 45.3% on Chinese-made electric vehicles. Stack that on top of the existing 10% import tariff for complete vehicles, and the total cost of a car shipped to Europe jumps by nearly half. The US went even further, cranking tariffs all the way up to 100%, doubling car prices overnight. Most analysts predicted at the time that Chinese EVs would be finished in Europe. But what actually happened? They didn't flop. Tariffs kept climbing, and sales kept right on growing with them. Two lines that should move in opposite directions are now heading the exact same way. There's no trickery here. Let me cut straight to the point. No matter how high they build this tariff wall, it can't stop everyone looking for a way around it. Chinese automakers have multiple routes to detour, adapt, and absorb the costs. How exactly did they break through this seemingly impenetrable wall? To answer that, you first need to understand just how high the wall is. On the EU side, the European Commission launched an anti-subsidy investigation on its own initiative back in 2023, claiming Chinese EVs benefit from unfair state support and are undercutting European automakers. The investigation dragged on for over a year. When it concluded in 2024, different companies got different duty rates based on how cooperative they were. BYD got around 17%, Geely nearly 19%, and SAIC, deemed uncooperative, got the highest rate at 35.3%. Those rates stack on top of the EU's standard 10% import tariff for all complete passenger vehicles. Do the math, SAIC's cars face over 45% total tax to enter the EU. A car that costs a bit over 200,000 yuan at home ends up close to 300,000 yuan at the destination. That extra 100,000 yuan is enough to buy another entry-level sedan in China. The US took a blunter approach, no tiered rates. In 2024, it jacked up EV tariffs on China from 25% to 100% in one go, doubling prices on the spot. It basically welded the market door shut. Canada followed right behind, also slapping 100% tariffs on Chinese EVs plus 25% on Chinese steel and aluminum, clamping down on both fronts. The official reasoning was the same everywhere: protect local industry and jobs. Turkey took a different angle, imposing extra tariffs on Chinese passenger cars as high as 40%, pushing prices even higher in an already pricey market. Brazil started phasing out its previous import tax breaks in 2024, raising tariffs step by step every year from 10% to 18%, then 25%, and now back up to nearly 35% this year. It's like slowly closing a door that used to be wide open. Emerging markets like South Africa and India have also started debating whether to follow suit with higher tariffs to keep Chinese automakers from taking over their local markets too fast. Put all these countries and regions together, and it's clear this isn't isolated moves by single markets. It's a collective reaction from major Western economies, all happening around the same time, each getting more aggressive than the last. But there's one exception among all these walls. The US's 100% tariff wall is, so far, the only one that has completely kept competitors out. Chinese automakers haven't made any serious push into that market yet, not even a proper dealer network. And it's not just tariffs. The US Commerce Department has rolled out new rules in recent years targeting connected car software and hardware. Basically, any smart connected components made in China are locked out of the US market. It's a double lock: tariffs plus access rules. For now, no one's found a way around that US wall. But the European wall is a different story. Faced with rising tariffs in Europe, normal business logic would say, if you can't get around it, pull out and focus on markets you're better at. But Chinese automakers' first move wasn't to retreat. It was to move their factories right to the other side of the wall. And this play actually uses a loophole the EU left for itself. The loophole is in how tariffs are defined. Tariffs apply to cars imported from China. Flip that around. What if the car never comes from China in the first place, but is built locally? That's where the crack opens up. It sounds simple on paper, but pulling it off is a huge, expensive bet. Building a full car factory costs billions of yuan, and you wait 1 to 2 years before the first car rolls off the line. That's exactly what BYD is doing with its plant in Szeged, Hungary, its first passenger car factory in Europe, planned for annual output of hundreds of thousands of vehicles. Once it's up and running, those cars legally count as EU-made goods. Number 45% tariff at all. Same car, different status. The Szeged plant costs over 10 billion yuan in total. BYD's biggest single overseas investment to date. The local government even built new rail lines and power facilities to attract the project. After all, a car factory brings thousands of jobs and pulls in a whole cluster of parts suppliers. The cleverest move is in Turkey. BYD is building a plant in Izmir, Turkey, for around $1 billion, with planned annual capacity of 150,000 units. On the surface, it's to dodge Turkey's own extra tariffs of up to 40%. But the real genius is what comes next. Turkey and the EU have had a customs union agreement since the 1990s. Any industrial product made locally in Turkey can be sold duty-free straight into the EU market. So one factory solves two markets' tariff problems at once. It gets around Turkey's wall and slips right past the EU's 45% wall too. The EU's own agreement became a key to get around its own tariffs. It's a detour even Turkey and the EU probably never saw coming once production starts. Turkey will become one of BYD's most important production bases around Europe. Brazil uses a different play. BYD took over an old Ford factory there and restarted production, investing over 5 billion yuan to deal with Brazil's rising import tariffs. Ford pulled out of local manufacturing years ago and left the plant empty. BYD took it over, retrofitted the existing lines, and saved most of the time of building from scratch. These aren't slapdash assembly sheds. Their full production operations move to places tariffs can't reach, physically tearing a chunk out of the wall. Part suppliers are moving right along with them. A whole cluster of Chinese supply chain companies, batteries, seats, wiring harnesses are growing up around these plants, building a full local support network across Europe and Turkey. But building factories has a hard limit. It takes 1 to 3 years to start production. It's slow and it can't fix immediate problems. What really caught European dealers off guard this past year was a much faster trick. Chinese automakers quietly gave a bunch of their cars a new identity. This identity swap targets the exact line the EU drew in its rules. The EU's countervailing investigation and tariffs aim very specifically at battery electric vehicles. Plug-in hybrids and regular gasoline cars aren't on the list at all. That was a gap the European Commission left when it set the scope of the investigation. As soon as that loophole was spotted, Chinese automakers reacted faster than European rivals expected. Brands that used to push mostly pure EVs for export quickly ramped up the share of plug-in hybrids and range extenders in their export catalogs. Still made in China, still electric drive. They just add a fuel tank and an engine, carry a different tech label, and drive into European ports. Under current rules, customs can't charge them the countervailing duty. This isn't some shady loophole trick. It's rearranging your product lineup strictly by the rules the other side wrote. If the rules only target pure EVs, you lead with plug-in hybrids first, and adjust the pace later when tariff pressure eases on pure EVs. You play the cards by the rulebook as written. European dealers feel it most directly. Last year, their show. This year, plug-in hybrids and range extenders make up a much bigger share of their orders. Some dealers say the shift was so fast their procurement teams could barely keep up, and order sheets had to be rewritten almost every month. There's another layer to this strategy. A lot of European households can't install home chargers. Plug-in hybrids let people enjoy electric driving without range anxiety, so they were already pretty well accepted. The rule gap lines up perfectly with real consumer demand. What makes this move so powerful is how fast it works. It needs basically zero new fixed investment. Just reordering your product catalog. Building factories takes years. Export numbers can shift the same month tariffs kick in. A wall built just for pure EVs gets walked right around by plug-in hybrids. The gap in the rules itself became the fastest way through. Of course, no one knows how long that gap will stay open. There's already talk in the EU about expanding the investigation to plug-in hybrids. This cat and mouse game is far from over. Building factories gets around one wall. Switching product identity gets around another. One slow, one fast, one long-term, one immediate. They cover each other's gaps. But Chinese automakers have an even bigger card up their sleeve. Europe and the US are only part of the global market. Instead of bashing your head against two built-up walls, why not do business where there are no walls at all? Look at the whole world map. Chinese automakers have studied it over and over these past few years, and spotted a clear pattern. Russia is the most straightforward example. After 2022, Western, Japanese, and Korean brands pulled out of Russia en masse. Those familiar names disappeared from dealer signs almost overnight. Chinese brands filled almost the entire gap they left. Now, over half of all new cars sold in Russia wear Chinese badges. The value is clear after sales networks keep expanding. Southeast Asia is another battleground. Thailand used to be a decades-old stronghold for Japanese carmakers. Once called the Detroit of Asia, Japanese giants had been there for 50 years. But in recent years, BYD, Great Wall, SAIC MG have all built plants in Thailand. In the pure EV segment, Chinese brands hold over 70% market share. Japanese brands are now the ones playing catch-up. No one would have believed that turnaround 5 years ago. The Thai government rolled out EV industry incentives in recent years to attract foreign factories, hoping to replicate the industrial cluster effect Japanese cars brought. But Chinese brands were the first to cash in on those policies. In the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, people used to see Chinese cars as cheap basic transport. Now they're coming with LiDAR and big smart cockpits. And acceptance grows every year. At local auto shows, Chinese booths get bigger and bigger, and test drive bookings can go toe-to-toe with traditional luxury brands. In Latin America, even with Brazil's tariffs climbing to nearly 35%, Chinese new energy vehicle sales keep rising. Because even after tariffs, they're still cheaper than Western brand models assembled locally. Put all these markets together, and you see the pattern. The harder Europe and the US raise tariffs, the harder Chinese automakers push into markets with no walls or lower walls. The tariff wall is literally pushing China's export map outward. It's like a river. If someone builds a dam upstream, the water doesn't disappear. It just spreads out to lower ground. The higher the dam, the farther the water spreads. These emerging global south markets add up to a population and car demand no smaller than Europe and the US combined. For a long time, no one took them seriously. Now they're a battlefield no automaker can ignore. Local production, product shifts, new markets. These three moves are all part of the same flexible strategy, all about speed. But flexibility alone won't win a long fight. You need real strength behind it. Otherwise, you can't sustain a price war. What really makes Chinese EVs still cheaper than rivals, even after tariffs, is something Western automakers can't catch up to, no matter how hard they try. Cost. And the cost answer is batteries. Batteries make up 30 to 40% of an EV's total cost. They're the single most expensive part, more than the body, seats, and smart cockpit combined. In the global battery industry, California TL and BYD plus Calb, Goshen High Tech, and other Chinese firms control over 70% of global installed battery capacity. CATL alone holds nearly 40%. That scale means roughly 1 in every 3 EVs sold worldwide runs on a CATL battery. Go one step upstream. China controls over 90% of global battery-grade graphite refining capacity. It also leads by a huge margin in refining lithium, cobalt, and other key raw materials. At every link from ore to cell, Chinese companies are there. That means no matter where Western automakers build their assembly plants, if their batteries use materials from the Chinese supply chain or just Chinese-made cells, they're already behind on cost. You can't close that gap just by building a few local factories. Europeep has pushed its own battery localization projects in recent years, pouring in a lot of money, but ramping up production and stabilizing yield takes time. Right now, the gap hasn't really narrowed. Industry analysts calculate that Chinese-made battery packs cost roughly half as much per kilowatt, or as those from European and American battery makers. Translated into plain terms, even with 40 to 45% tariffs on Chinese cars, their final sticker price can still be more competitive than comparable European assembled models. You are adding tariffs, they're cutting battery costs by nearly half. It's not even the same order of magnitude. Tariffs can erase part of the price advantage, but they can't erase this deeper cost structure. BYD started out making batteries. Its founder once said a famous line, "A car is nothing but 4 wheels and 2 sofas." That battery-first approach made BYD one of the few automakers in the world that builds its own batteries, its own chips, and even its own car carrier ships. A few years back, global Ro-Ro ship capacity was tight. Freight rates skyrocketed, and ships were hard to book. BYD just built its own ships to carry cars. Each ship holds over 7,000 vehicles, sailing straight to ports in Europe, South America, and Southeast Asia. The first one is called Explorer No. 1, BYD's first self-invested pure car carrier. When it launched, a lot of people in the industry wondered if the investment was worth it. A few years later, the answer is clear. Its own fleet now covers major export routes, no more begging for ship slots. This end-to-end approach, from raw materials all the way to shipping logistics, is something traditional Western automakers never did. While others wait in line for a spot on a ship, BYD sails its whole fleet out. This battery moat wasn't dug overnight. The supply chain behind it is over a decade in the making. To understand how China got so far ahead in batteries, you have to go back in time. Go back to the early 2000s. In 2001, new energy vehicle research was added to national key science and technology plans. That was the very start of this road. Back then, EVs were still a lab concept to most people. In 2009, the 10 cities, 1,000 vehicles new energy vehicle demonstration program launched, giving subsidies for new energy vehicles in public transit like buses and taxis in around 10 cities. It was the first time this concept hit real roads in bulk. At first, passengers were confused. They'd get on a bus and wonder why it was so quiet if it was broken. That was the first time regular people encountered EVs in daily life. From 2013 to 2016, subsidies expanded to private car purchases, and the market took off fast. But this period also exposed fraud problems. A bunch of companies faked vehicle numbers and delivery records to pocket subsidies. Media reports at the time said some companies even submitted half-assembled cars to claim funds, scamming millions to hundreds of millions of yuan. Regulations tightened quickly after that. Audit processes got a lot stricter, and a wave of free-riding companies got cleaned out of the industry. Around 2016, there was another easy-to-miss policy. The recommended battery catalog for power batteries only included domestic battery makers for a long time. Japanese and Korean giants like Panasonic, LG, and Samsung couldn't qualify for domestic EV subsidies. If a car used a foreign battery, buyers didn't get the subsidy. That threshold effectively locked foreign batteries out of the market. That window of time gave CATL and BYD exactly the chance to grow and scale on their home turf. By the time those Japanese and Korean giants tried to compete again, Chinese battery companies already had scale and cost advantages that were hard to close. The crackdown also raised the bar across the industry. After that, companies getting subsidies had to pass real vehicle spot checks and data verification. Faking numbers to steal money was basically over subsidies. Started phasing down in 2017 and ended completely at the end of 2022. After they ended, EV sales kept growing. If anything faster, that proves the industry can compete on its own without subsidies. People always say Chinese EVs are cheap because of subsidies. But subsidies ended completely at the end of 2022. And after that, the price advantage didn't go away. It got even stronger on the global stage. That timeline says more than any argument. An industry that lives on subsidies would collapse the moment subsidies go away. Connect that timeline up. China's new energy vehicle industry took about 20 years, starting with policy support step by step to get where it is today, competing globally on cost and technology with no subsidies. Over those 20 years, industrial policy built the stage. But the market itself decided who stayed and who got cut. What decided who could survive and go global was the brutal battle already fought in the domestic market. That fight was even fiercer than the tariff walls outside. Fierce enough that a lot of people look back and say it was almost scary. When subsidies started phasing out, there were over 100 new energy vehicle brands in China. The track was insanely crowded. Everyone from traditional car makers to internet companies jumped in. Anyone who could raise money wanted a piece. In 2023, a price war led by top brands swept the whole industry. Dozens of brands cut prices almost every month. Some models dropped price multiple times in a year, from thousands to tens of thousands of yuan. Consumers joked you had to check for official price cuts before buying. Wait a month, and you might lose enough money for a new phone. Some brands cut prices 5 or 6 times in a year. Early owners would see their car drop tens of thousands in value right after they bought it, get frustrated, even protest at dealerships. You don't need commentary to see how brutal it was. Just look at the results. Promising startups like WM Motor and iWays fell into production halts and debt crises, left by the wayside. And it wasn't just those two. A whole wave of brands that once raised huge amounts of capital burned through their money, ran out of stories, and left shuttered factories and unpaid workers in the news every few weeks. The brands that survived are the ones that pushed cost control, supply chain efficiency, and production pacing to the absolute limit. They pinch every penny, negotiate over every single screw. This brutal domestic price war acted as a filter. It forced survivors to compress new car development and production cycles to speeds Western automakers can barely imagine. European car makers take 3 to 5 years from concept to launch. Top Chinese brands can do it in 18 months or less. Model refreshes come so fast, consumers have to update their impression of a brand every few months. In the past couple years, there's even been pushback against this cutthroat price competition at home. Industry associations and some automakers have publicly called for an end to reckless price wars. That alone tells you how intense it got. Intense enough that the players themselves are crying foul.